Thank you. Okay, I was thinking my voice would not be, normal, but this is not my real voice. Please just bear with me. So I'm just going to do a quick presentation, just to prepare the way for the next panel, where my guys will be speaking about, very crucial points that would, really be beneficial to everyone here. But before I, start, I just want to get a sense, as I like to do, of the kind of audience we have here today. So let me start by first asking if today is the first crypto event to hear about Bitcoin for the first time. Now, regardless of how old you are in the industry, one of the principal things that you want to achieve here today is to understand what this entire ecosystem is about, understand, for those of you that have been here longer, understand where it's going to and how you can key into the next industrial revolution that is currently happening. I'm going to briefly talk about DeFi in Africa and the possibilities beyond the hype. So we'll first start talking about what DeFi is. We'll talk about the difference between Defy, C5, and TradFi. We'll also talk about the hype. What is the hype about crypto and DeFi? Then we'll now talk about the realities. That's what actual use cases there are that are not just hype. We'll quickly run through this. I don't know if the slide is up. Is the slide here? So you can just follow as I go ahead. So over the last few years, several innovations and buzzwords have become key drivers for Web3 and blockchain adoption across the world. Some of those, buzzwords range from ICOs. Who remembers the ICO era? So ICOs were a way that people raised money without necessarily getting money from VCs or getting money from a public offering, an IPO. So ICO was the crypto version of an IPO, where imagine when WhatsApp started, imagine you had an opportunity to buy early shares in WhatsApp or like a WhatsApp coin. Back then probably you were the only one using WhatsApp in your whole contact list. By now, I think you would have made some, profits or benefits from that particular investment. So ICOs then allowed people to, be a part of the project, not just as a user, but also allow the users benefit in the growth of the platform. And the second thing that happened was, the DeFi era really kicked off. And then immediately after the DeFi era, we started hearing a lot of things about meme coins and a bunch of stuff. Today we hear about NFTs, gaming, and the metaverse. Now, these are all key things that are propelling crypto adoption. Why? Because if crypto was just about buying and selling coins, I don't think we'll have more than just traders in the industry, isn't it? So it's a lot more. There are a lot more use cases that are springing up every single day and that are revolutionizing the way that people live and people do business. Is the slide going to be, is someone working on it? Just let me see. Okay, let me just go on. So to understand DeFi, which is a key fundamental part of blockchain, let me just use this thing and explain something. I saw it when I came in here. So now this is Web3, and this is DeFi, and this is blockchain. So in this order, for Web3 to be possible, right, DeFi had to exist. It means that people had to be able to use this concept, and then for this concept to be possible, then blockchain had to power that, right? So what is, the internet that's talking about Web3? The earlier speaker had already mentioned, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. In simple terms, it was Web 1, for those of you that weren't there for that session, is the synthetic web. From the early 90s, from 1990 to the year 2000. Now that era was fueled by the,
rise of computerization, right, of personal computers. So if there were no personal computers, that first era of the web would probably be very difficult to achieve. So in the first era of the web, we have companies like Google, Yahoo, and Amazon, really driving that innovation that we saw in that first era. And then from the year 2000 to the year 2010, we now had like the beginning of the new drive called Web 2. And in the Web 2 era, I like to call it the social web, right? It's the web we use and know today. And that era was fueled by mobile. Say mobile. So it was fueled by mobile. And guess what? Mobile that you use today, many people do not understand how impactful it is. But without your mobile phones, many of the things we see with crypto today and even Web 2 apps would not be possible. For instance, an Uber is mobile first, right? So imagine there was no innovation around ride sharing or Airbnb and the rest. It would impact the way people live today. And what I'm trying to say here is Web 2 has made the internet an integral part of our lives. It means that people now socialize on the internet. And Web 3 is then the semantic web, where it is possible to not only read and write, but also to execute. It means that on this Web 3, you're able to actually interact with self-executing code. And that's where DeFi comes in. So DeFi basically is a set of financial services that exist on the internet. So I wrote something down here. I said, simply put, DeFi is a set of financial providers set up on a public blockchain. With DeFi applications, you can carry out any financial service that a bank can do, such as earn interest, borrow, lend, buy insurance, trade assets, trade derivatives, and so much more. The significant difference between DeFi and banks is that DeFi is a global peer-to-peer infrastructure. This means that it is directly between two people and does not go through a centralized system, and is also open to all. According to DeFi Pulse, the value of digital assets locked in DeFi services globally was less than $1 billion in 2015, in 2009. And it grew from less than $1 billion to 15 billion around 2020. And in just 1 year, it grew in 2021 to over $80 billion. Now, this is just the value locked in several DeFi protocols. And this particular statistics I just shared just references the fact that people actually believe and actually are using these services enough for companies like Polygon, Binance Chain, and the rest of these new blockchains to invest resources into training developers and getting more and more people involved in building dApps. Now, dApps are known as decentralized applications. Now, these are the applications that you interact with directly on the internet. So, for instance, a PancakeSwap is a DeFi app. It's an exchange, basically, that runs on its own. The liquidity is provided by people, and the people that provide the liquidity earn an interest, while the people that trade on the platform are trading peer-to-peer. It's a very interesting application, as simple as it is. And that's also what has also given rise to a bunch of the other things people use today, like gaming and the rest. So I'm just going to quickly talk about the differences between DeFi and C5. So before I talk about DeFi and C5, there's a word called TradFi. So TradFi is the current system, is the banks, is the traditional finance, right? Now, C5 is kind of like the hybrid. It's the gap or the infrastructure that exists between DeFi and TradFi. So basically, your crypto app today, your centralized platform, any of the sponsors here, that you see today are kind of like the hybrid. So they're helping people access crypto. They're helping people get involved, right? Giving you the financial service that your traditional system will give to you, and also having some of the attributes of the DeFi, ecosystem. So what are now the differences between DeFi and C5? So you see it's a progression. The first is TradFi, then there is C5, then there is DeFi. Some people mix up TradFi and C5. So I just wanted to clear that out. So now, differences between DeFi and C5. The first is that DeFi is decentralized, right? Obviously. And then C5 is also what? Centralized. What that means is that there is a middleman in C5 that is in charge of, employing people, custodying the fund, providing security, and doing a bunch of other activities on the app, right? So it's centralized. It's custodial. An example of a C5 app is, any centralized exchange, say Bundle, for instance. A DeFi app is one that does not need a third party to either custody the funds, number one. It means that your funds are not with anybody. Not your keys, not your coins, right? So in a DeFi app, you custody the funds, number one. Number two, the fees are not charged by just one person in DeFi. In C5, the fees are obviously charged by one person. But in DeFi, the fees are actually mostly shared across the network, okay? So another difference between the both of them is that one is centralized, is that one is permissioned, and the other one is permissionless, right? So it means that for one of them, you need to do, for instance, you need to KYC, you need to onboard, they have to review your application and then accept or reject you, right? So it's permissioned. You can't just access it openly. While DeFi is permissionless. You just open the app, connect your wallets, and do your transactions. Another thing is that DeFi is uncensored, while C5 is censored, right? So censorship, an example of censorship is when, let's say there's a sanction list and you can't service anybody on the sanction list, right? Maybe, for instance, a company like PayPal doesn't have, I think PayPal has limited offerings to Nigerians or something like that, right? So there is a lot of things like geofencing that apply to both TradFi and C5 platforms that are not applicable to a DeFi platform. So a DeFi platform does not care, just like Bitcoin. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care what you do for a living. It doesn't even care to know a bunch of things about you. You just connect your wallet again and do your transactions, right? And because of that, there are that's one of the aspects of DeFi that raises a lot of eyebrows to law enforcement and regulators, right? Because it's important for them to control. Not because control is bad, but because if without control, a lot of bad things can happen, right? But at the same time, too much control stifles innovation. So there's always a problem of the balance. So why I'm giving you this particular explanation is to understand that neither is bad or good. It's not about the bad guy and the good guy here. It's about understanding how technology has evolved. And then lastly, I wrote that, the fees are cheaper on one, and on the other, the fees are more expensive. There are some advantages of C5, actually, in terms of user experience. For instance, there are several DeFi platforms that have had to, have some of their users who lost their keys, for instance, and they can't recover them because the keys are only known by the user. So you can easily lose your money, for instance, if you are not technical enough to understand how to manage the use of a DeFi platform. When you hear sometimes, Bored Ape was hacked, because there was a particular phishing site that people went and connected their wallet and authorized the transaction, because of a sale was going on, and next thing you know, all the coins and NFTs in their wallets were moved. So those kind of issues happen, right? But it doesn't just happen with DeFi alone. Let me give you a typical example. For those of you that are active in the crypto space, very recently, especially with this, current market, something happened. Luna, right, crashed, in simple terms. Now, Luna, like some, people who promise, a stable, does not change, does not go up, does not go down, right? Just to shit. Anyway, so point is that Luna is one of the many experiments that will happen in crypto. Some will fail, some will succeed, right? But that's DeFi. But there's a centralized platform called Celsius at the same time. Centralized, right? At the end of the day, Celsius as a company ended up, going nearly busts because of, that same, coin. But the point here is that the same way a centralized platform can fail, a decentralized platform can also fail. So you have to understand that, with everything that relates to technology, whether it's a bank or it's C5 or it's DeFi, the fact that it is online, there is that chance that, it can be compromised, right? So that's just to put it out there. There are some examples of DeFi and C5 that I just put up here. If you go to the next slide, you'll see it. If you recognize up to 4 or 5 of these guys, then, you are doing well. I'll just quickly run through some myths in DeFi, right? This is the hype of DeFi. So when you hear some of these things, they are actually not true, but people just say them. So talking about the hype. So what is the hype? The first is that DeFi has complete anonymity, right? Complete anonymity. That basically, if I use DeFi today, nobody can catch me. I can, steal money from, this platform or this person and send it to PancakeSwap and pancake it and then send it out and, nobody is seeing me. Well, people can see you. In fact, they can easily catch you. Okay, I have a few minutes left. Now, the key thing here is that the same way technology is increasing, analytics tools and a bunch of stuff are helping more and more people understand how to track, decentralized applications. It means that, for instance, there are people today that are monitoring how people trade on, Uniswap and PancakeSwap and the rest of them. Because there, your data, your trading data is actually public. If you buy a coin and sell it at a profit, people will see that you have sold it at a profit if you know how to check it. And from that publicly available data, people are learning about the strategies of other traders and a bunch of other stuff. That's why for a lot of whales, they prefer to just, spread out their funds in a lot of wallets to make it harder. But it is not anonymous. It's, I think, pseudonymous or something like that. So then the second myth is that DeFi is safer than traditional banks. I think I've already talked about this, right? So DeFi is not safer than the bank, for instance. Now, DeFi can be as safe as the bank, right? If you understand how to use it properly, which is where education comes in. So, as I said before, same with everything that has to do with technology, the key risk most of the time is with the user, right? Is it what? The user. And then the last myth that I want to share is that DeFi will eliminate the banks. Okay, this is the anarchist mindset, meaning that, back then, we wanted to replace the existing system. We don't want banks anymore, right? But I think as, we've all grown and come to realize that actually, in the ideal world, many of these things, many of the existing systems will have to evolve. So when Satoshi created Bitcoin, he didn't create it to be a replacement. He created it to be an alternative, basically separating money from states, right? And creating the money of the internet that people can choose to use as an alternative, and also understand that they don't have to depend on, government-backed currencies, okay? I see a future where even banks will custody crypto, right? The post offices, and emails. What happened between two of them? Most of the post offices that are alive today have had to evolve, right? So that's probably what will happen as well. But if today, in this age that all of you have 5G, there are some people somewhere that are using cash and are basically unbankable, meaning that they don't even have KYC to bank, right? So crypto will definitely help not bank them, but Bitcoin them, right? So crypto will help do that. However, there will still be a need for decentralized traditional system, but it will have to evolve or it will die, okay? And then, lastly, I just put up some, use cases for DeFi that are actually real. So these are not hype, right? These are the real use cases. People have access to, cheap loans from anywhere in the world. You can save your money and earn interest that are probably higher than you get from your government. There are people that even if you don't have capital, today you can actually sit down on your phone, play games for 3 hours a day, and earn like 5K, So that is happening as well. And, the safety of your assets, you have ownership. It means that if, for instance, there's a war that breaks out in your country, and you move to another country, if you have crypto, you are not dependent on, the bank to withdraw your money or those kind of stuff. You can just easily move with your words, your phones. So lastly, I just wanted to conclude with this statement. I wanted to just, ask us to imagine an ecosystem of opportunities where big techs or governments don't control user interaction and content creation. A world where the internet subscription can sit on a transferable NFT, where a mix of digital and physical goods drive commerce, and soulbound tokens can provide identity while owning name.eth and its on-chain data gives people an idea of the type of person that you are and the things that you're interested in. Whereas decentralized fiat on-ramp and off-ramp channels like CashLink will continue to help more and more people on board into the decentralized applications that will be created, especially in regions where there are restrictions with banks interacting with these platforms. Overall, the key thing about this hype about Bitcoin is that in the end, the possibilities of DeFi are actually still just getting started. There are a bunch of things that are hype about it, but in itself, there is actual value. And in the next session, we'll be talking about some of these things and hearing from other panelists as they share, insights on it. But the key thing here is that Africa cannot be left behind. Thank you very much.